And then again, make that available. It's great to see your faces. One of the great things about webcams, of course, is they don't pick up on whether you're wearing makeup or not, whether you've showered or not, whether, right? That's pretty great. It's a good life in that sense. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a quick roll call, okay? Just so I can see who's all here, make sure I'm tracking. So Lauren?
Here.
Awesome. Connor?
Here.
Cool. Jake?
Here.
AJ? No AJ. Going once, going twice. Okay. Joe Cordo, I know, is here. Joe Di Pasquale?
Here.
Cool. Claire? Not yet. Okay. Bryce?
Here.
Patrick? Not yet. Okay. Kyle is here, I know. Lexi?
Here.
Cool. Sam Hoffman?
Here.
Cool. Max?
Here.
Chloe?
Here.
Clay?
Here.
Nice. Tiana?
Here.
Nice. Sam Martinez? Yes or no?
Here.
Yes, there you are. There you are. Annika?
Here.
I know you're here. Gerardo? Not yet. Okay. Lindsay?
Here.
Okay. Sam Schmitz?
Here.
Yes. Mason?
Here.
Awesome. Katie?
Here.
Nick?
Here.
There you are. Evan? Evan, no, not yet. Okay. And Dave?
Here.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Again, I don't do this in a face-to-face class. I don't ever take a roll call or anything like that because I can just look around and see who's there. But it's a little bit harder with people's names popping up and off and all that stuff in this format. So I appreciate you being willing to do all of that. I think that today's session will be fairly short. I think. No guarantees, but relatively so. I think that will be the case. I imagine you can find other things to do. One thing I do want to do is I want to check in and see what you all are thinking about our continuing stay-at-home stuff. What are some thoughts on that? Are you thinking that's okay? Not so okay? What's on your mind about this quarantining stuff these days? Somebody share.
Honestly, it's getting embarrassing.
Yeah, how so, Dave? What are you thinking about?
I think considering how Wisconsin is kind of in the middle of the pack and we have the third longest stay-at-home order, it does not make sense to me at all. Only Illinois and Virginia are worse. So
Okay. That's one
I want to get
perspective.
out and enjoy life again.
Yeah.
I'm getting really fed up.
Who votes for wanting to get back out and enjoying life again? Yes. Oh,
And honestly, I do think the data shows that it's time to at least somewhat get back on track.
Okay, other folks, what do you think? Let's spend a few moments talking about this. Let's hear your thoughts. Agree or disagree?
Well, so I don't think that we should have much more of the stay at home all that much, just because the purpose of it in the beginning was to flatten the curve, and the curve has been flattened. So I feel like we should try to slowly get back to normal. I don't think that everyone should go out right away, but I think if we can start sending some people back to work or some people back into the community, it'll be good, because I feel like otherwise our immune systems are kind of not really doing the best right now. Like in the fall, we're all going to just be getting sick because none of us are around other people. So our immune systems aren't being stronger like they would be otherwise.
Okay. Other thoughts? Let's hear from folks. Share your thinking. Be bold.
I think just from a selfish perspective, I'm getting really annoyed with my family, so I'd like to go outside and hang out with my friends again.
Who else feels like that? You can be honest, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
I love my family, but Joe, you bring up a good point. I mean, there's some truth to that. I love them, but it is like we're all like locked in this place together. So I mean, also as far as this whole situation is concerned, I've seen, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen a lot of my friends and other people kind of be more lenient with this. I know that right away they kind of like locked in and kind of followed these rules. I'm not saying that they still aren't, but they still are following the rules. But I see a lot of more like lenience, and kind of just people are kind of getting to that point where they're basically just trying to get back to the normal lifestyle.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
My concern is mainly for like small businesses. In my town in particular, we have about 200 small businesses in our downtown area, and there's been estimates that 50 are going to have to close because of this. And I used to work for one of those small businesses downtown, and I would honestly be so crushed if she had to close. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts?
I will say that sooner or later, some of these things we're gonna have to go outside sooner or later, only because people have to start going back to work. I know myself in particular, I'm starting work this weekend, and so it's like, if that gets canceled, then am I gonna have the money to pay for next semester? So sooner or later, we're gonna have to decide: do people have to go back to their jobs?
Yeah. This is tough, and I think part of what makes it more complicated is that we're still operating in a context where we don't have really good information, right? So, depending on what you read, where you read, who you pay attention to, of course, there are the ends of the spectrum, right? The people who are saying we can't go back out, we just need to stay quarantined for however long. And then you've got the people on the other end of the spectrum saying this is a violation of my civil liberties, which that's an entirely different question, right? And everybody should just be able to do whatever they want. And then there's everything in between. And of course, there's the science of this all in terms of what does it mean to achieve so-called herd immunity? Is this a virus that will behave like other viruses that we are familiar with behave? In fact, for example, if one has been exposed to it, does that mean that one is immune? Or is there still the potential that a person could be reinfected and therefore potentially reinfect or infect other people? And the answers are not clear. So Tiana asked the question, what do I think about countries that are using the herd method like Sweden? So Sweden's approach has been to not lock down quite as conservatively as we have. It doesn't mean they haven't locked down at all. That's a misunderstanding. They have to some degree, but not to the degree that we have. For example, their lower level schools are still open. And their argument for that is that the data do not necessarily support the idea that children are more likely to get this virus, or when they do, the consequences are not as likely to be as severe. I think that the reality of all of this is always somewhere in the middle, in that I do think that some degree of reopening makes a lot of sense. I really do. And I'm coming at this from the perspective of a person who studies human behavior for a living and disasters. This is the stuff that I do, right? I think it is, in fact, possible to reopen some of these businesses the smaller ones. However, here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. The science is telling us that when people wear masks, they are less likely to infect others. And if I'm wearing a mask, I'm less likely to be infected. If we're all wearing masks, that's sort of an ideal state, right? Can we get everybody to wear masks? Some people, I'll give you an example. My parents, I talked to my stepmom and dad Monday or Tuesday. I said, do you guys have masks? No. And you're still going to the grocery store and stuff. Now they're in their later 70s. Hey man, let's get you some masks. Okay. So I took care of that. So some people just don't have them. They're not on social media, so they haven't seen all of the ways that you can make a mask out of a bandana, that sort of thing, right? So they don't know. If people mask up, I think a lot more businesses could open up. And as long as they're following social distancing guidelines, I really do. I personally would feel safer in some of these smaller businesses than I do walking into a Costco. And you won't catch me walking into a Walmart because there seems to be like a degree of stupid that permeates the clientele of Walmart where they just don't pay attention to anything. And I'm not talking about, this is not a class issue. I see stupid at every socioeconomic level. It's just something about Walmart that brings out the stupid in people. It's amazing. I'd rather go into a small business. How many of you agree? I personally would feel safer. I think restaurants ultimately are going to have to engage in, they'll have to have the tables further apart and so on. But I think they could do that. They're already they've already got employees working to do carry out and takeout. What would be the difference? It would be better for them at least to be able to have, let's say, half of their normal capacity, even a third of their normal capacity, right? So I think that there will be more and more calls for that, and we will see more reopening. I think this idea that some people could just stay home and that will work, and it's not going to work. I think ultimately as we reopen, we will see more people get sick. Some people will deal with that really well. There is no way to know if you will be one of those people who will deal with it really well. You all have taken statistics, so you should have an understanding of probability that exceeds that of the average person in the population. And you know that while the probability is that a younger person will not get severely sick, that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to not get severely sick, right? Ditto with, while the probability is higher that an older person will get sick and will have severe symptoms, etc. While the probability is that, doesn't mean that every single older person will. So the thing with risk, I'm all for taking risks as long as people truly understand what's at stake and truly understand probability. I don't actually think most of society understands that stuff, but I think that there's sufficient pressure. We're going to be reopening. I also think what I told you last week about schools opening in the fall, unless something really bizarre happens between now and August, St. Norbert College is opening up face-to-face, just like most colleges like us will do. I fully expect that. Again, unless some new information comes to light. So I would rather, if it were possible for us to all go out and for some percentage of us to contract this virus, then that would help the rest of us to have a greater chance of not contracting the virus or not getting as severely sick. I'd be all on board with that. I also do think that between now and August, we're going to see more medicine that will become available to help people as they do get sick, and that will make a difference. And who was it who brought up the point about flattening the curve? I am reading good things about I'm reading more and more about availability of personal protective equipment for our healthcare workers and the availability of beds. This makes a huge difference. In Wisconsin, of course, Brown County right now is a hot spot. So if you live in Brown County, yeah, this is not a good time to be out and about because we've had a surge in cases. But there are parts of Wisconsin and other states too, where for real, there's hardly any of this, right? I mean, if you live in northern Wisconsin, where there's hardly anybody in the first place, relatively speaking, of course, odds are things are fine. So we'll see. We'll see. I think as the weather gets nicer, people are, who is it who said, not so much that people have been cheating, but let's just say people will cheat more. This is my guess. What do you think?
Yeah, I said that people
Yeah.
have kind of been cheating.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and actually
I've
some
been
of that.
mildly a cheater myself, but I've brought it down. I'm trying to be a good citizen here.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm hopeful. Okay. Let's move on, shall we? Let's talk about last week's discussion question. So I want to show you my screen. I want to show you how I summarize what you all said. Again, some fantastic observations that you made. Very impressive. So I don't know. Can you see here? It should be coming. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yep. Cool. Why all jobs should be designed as good jobs. I pulled out a few quotes from what you had to say. I want to reiterate something I think I've said previously, but I want to say it one more time. I have been extremely impressed by this class, which makes me even more sad and disappointed that we are not in person with each other, because I think that we would really be rocking in that particular environment. But even without being face to face, you all are a smart and engaged bunch. So I am so appreciative. And when I read not only your discussion responses, but also your exam essays, I'm seeing a bunch of folks who are getting it, and that's fantastic. So I pulled out a few quotes, and then I also summarized some things. I like a lot of what you had to say, but I don't want to pull out everything because that's 13 pages when I print it. So that's kind of a lot, right? The working world needs to strike a better balance between rewarding those who are successful and allowing all workers, despite their ranking, to benefit and feel valued as an employee. More than anything, that statement captures how I feel. I believe that no matter one's socioeconomic status, no matter one's class, no matter one's level of education, every single human being deserves to be happy. I firmly believe that. I can't imagine the argument against that. And as a result, that means that as the people who will be designing jobs in the future, all y'all, we have a responsibility to think through and to do our best to try and make those jobs as good as possible. And we know, it's not a secret, we know what it takes to make a job a good job. We know. Now, I'm not suggesting that all jobs need to require the kinds of skills that maybe a person like me might use in my job, right? That's not what I'm talking about. But for any person looking at any job, they should have the opportunity to use a lot of different skills. They should be able to see how they fit into the big picture. They should know that what they do matters. They should have the opportunity to make at least some decisions about how they do what they do, and they should get feedback. I don't think any of that's unreasonable, right? I like this quote as well. Almost any job can be altered using the methods described in Chapter 6 to become good jobs. Yeah, we have the tools. We do. We can make this possible. Another comment, it's all about finding the right fit for who you are. Absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes, for example, I love my job, but you know what? My job is like a 24/7 kind of job. And what I mean by that is I'm never done. Do you know what I mean? I'm never done with my job. There's always more for me to do. It's not like I get to the end of a workday and I can punch out and I'm done. That's not how that works. When people ask, what do faculty members do in the summer? We're still working. Just because we're not teaching doesn't mean we're not working. We have all kinds of other requirements and asks in our job that have us doing things at all hours. When I get emails from students at 10 o'clock, if I happen to be looking at my email and it's a quick thing that I can answer, I'll do it. So it's not about punching the clock. On the other hand, there's a lot to be said for having a job where you go to work, you do your job, you punch out, and you're done, right? I mean, it's kind of glorious. And I always joke that when I retire, I'm going to pick up one of those jobs as kind of a part-time gig, just so that I can have a sense of closure. Go to work, do some good things, punch out. Fantastic. So I think depending on what a person wants, that also makes a difference. I also really liked this quote: letting workers have a voice is another big part in a good job. Yeah, right? Even people, again, without a lot of education, etc., they still have thoughts that are worth hearing. And then you all did a great job with other things. Why all jobs should be? Well, because there are all kinds of positive outcomes for the organization. All the stuff, all the dependent variables that we've talked about since the beginning of this class, right? In terms of motivation, performance, satisfaction, absenteeism, turnover, organizational citizenship behavior, deviant behavior. If you give people a good job, you're going to have better outcomes for the organization. Also for the individual. Frankly, giving people a good job makes economic sense. It saves and makes money for the organization. It also enables positive emotional contagion. When people are happy about their job, they convey that to other people. That helps other people feel good about their job, right? Positive feelings of self-worth, positive feelings of pride, self-identification. People want to feel proud of what they do and who they work for. Do you agree? I mean, I look at it as similar to, you want to be proud of the school you attend. You want to feel good about the choice that you've made. You don't want to be ashamed or embarrassed about this place or what you're asked to do as a member of this place. I already said, that we need to acknowledge that because people have different needs, how they define a good job will also differ. Everyone deserves this sense of satisfaction of worth, higher quality of life. We spend so much time at work, right? Or working. Having a good job helps a person have an overall higher quality of life. I also really like this idea of purpose and meaningfulness. I've always said people need purpose. People need to feel like what they're doing matters. Someone else also made the point about mental stimulation. Jobs where your brain's not engaged, those are the worst. You get bored, right? And then finally, again, this idea of people wanting to feel important and needed. I hope you remember this when you go forward, because you will. Again, you're going to be managers, folks. You will be leading organizations. Please remember that while it's great that you will have a good job, please do everything you can to make sure that the people who report to you also have good jobs that make them proud, that make them feel good about themselves. So fabulous work in this discussion, as usual. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Okie doke. How are we doing so far? Are we okay? 30 minutes in, we're hanging on. Solid. The sun is sort of kind of peeking out here in good old Alloway, Wisconsin. It's been dreary otherwise. Oh, before I started class today, about 9:45, I got a video call from my 5-year-old granddaughter. Today is her birthday. She lives about an hour and a half away from me, and she called so that I could watch her open her presents from me. She's into dinosaurs right now. So all of her presents had a dinosaur theme. And yeah, this is a pretty great thing. She's adorable, of course. I don't know if do you all remember when you were 5, what you were like just before kindergarten-ish? Yeah, no, some of you not so sure. Well,
Yeah, I actually was into the same dinosaurs as well.
yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah, I was
pretty.
a big dinosaur guy.
Dinosaurs are cool. 5-year-olds are awesome. Tons of energy, openness to life. Just adorable. I'm sure you were all adorable. Ask your parents just how cute you were. Go ahead, spend some time today reminiscing about how adorable you were as a tiny person. Not that you're not adorable now, you're still adorable, but as a tiny person, even more adorable, perhaps. Okay, go ahead and look at those photos. Have mom or dad or somebody pull them up and take a peek. And think happy birthday thoughts from my girl. Her name is Amelia. She also goes by Mia, and she's the middle. She's the second of the 3 girls. So she's something else. All right, let's talk chapter 9, shall we? Are we ready? Chapter 9. I'm going to talk about 3 points. I have to apologize again for not getting the narrated PowerPoints out there sooner. Life. I don't know. I have no other excuse. I'm just too busy. Life was just chaotic, and I finally was able to get to it yesterday. It isn't that I haven't been working. I assure you I have, but the faculty have been I've been in so many meetings that on my calendar, they're put out there for an hour and they end up being 3 hours long. It's just been extraordinary trying to do work this way, but apologies to you if you were looking to watch those. And if you weren't, no worries. You can watch them now. They're out there now, okay? They're 2 halves, so it's part 1 and part 2 for chapter 9, just under 30 minutes each one. So not a huge strain in terms of time for you. Great thing about this chapter is you've all been on teams. So a lot of the material, it should be very easy for you to sort of slot it in to your own experiences. So again, I'm going to talk about 3 topics. The first one I want to talk about is on page 1 of the lecture outline, and it's the one that deals with stages of group development. So how many of you have, you can put this in the chat, been part of at least one group project as a student in college? Lots and lots and lots. Okay. Follow-up question. How many of you have loved every one of those experiences? Yeah. So if you haven't loved them, why not? Throw something in the chat. Tell us why. Tell us why you haven't loved it. Okay. So these are definitely things that we can relate to. The topics covered in this chapter, right? As I'm looking at what you're saying, I'm seeing references to things like social loafing, right? People's personalities not necessarily jiving together, things like that. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about this. Well, before I go there, how many of you have been part of a team ever that you thought was great? Okay. I'm seeing yeses. I'm seeing yeses. So we know it's possible. I want someone who said yes, that they have participated in a team that's been great, to talk briefly about what made it great. Who's willing to go first? I would like to hear from a few people. Go ahead and unmute and tell us what you're thinking. Somebody be brave.
Excuse me. I played on a club soccer team where a lot of the guys had been playing together since we were 8, 10 years old up until high school. So by the time we were older, everyone knew each other's play style. Everyone knew as a person who our teammates were and everything like that. So we not only got along really well, but we like played together really well because we were comfortable with each other.
Okay, cool. Somebody else. Tell us about your experience being part of a great team. Again, you're not being judged or anything. Tell me what made it great. I saw more yeses. Go ahead, Tiana. Go ahead.
So for me, this was probably during high school at my job. I kind of recruited some people that I was friends with, and we just became like a really great working group. My boss, I still know to this day, and she says that we were still probably like the best group of workers that she had at that age because all of us just had a good work ethic. We just wanted to get stuff done so we could get out of there and do homework, and
Sure.
it was really great.
Cool. Somebody else, let's hear it. What made your experience great?
In high school, we would do like group projects and stuff, and we usually got to pick our group. So I, of course, picked my really good friends, which was also fun to work with because we knew each other's strengths. So we would always take parts of the project that we were comfortable and felt that we could do the best. And we all had like the common goal in mind that like we wanted to do great on the project and get an A. So that really helped. So we were always really successful.
Nice. Nice. Somebody else.
I'll go.
Yeah.
In grade school, my 8th grade year, it was set up so that our 8th grade year was a really special year for our basketball team because we were a pretty like state and nationally recognized like school for this Lutheran grade school. And what really set the tone for that year, I don't know if this has been brought up yet, but was my coach, who was a leader. To this day, he is a mentor of mine. He is positive, he is charismatic, and he made everybody buy in. And that is what made everybody come together and be successful, because without him, there wouldn't have been nearly as much effort. And the reason why we played was a lot ran deep through all of us, and that tone was set by him. So I think that is probably the most important part of how successful and how just overall enjoyable that group was, you know?
Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Leadership matters, right?
Of course.
I had the exact opposite experience of that. In high school, our soccer team was never really very good. And I truly think it was because of our coach. He was he didn't care about anything, and he didn't hold anybody accountable. And he would set like a standard, or he'd say like, here's my rule, and then he would never follow through on it. And you could tell that nobody was motivated. And even if like students or like me and my friends, we would try to step up and get people motivated or maybe try to have some standards, and nobody ever would care because there was just no motivation from the coach. So
again, leadership matters, right? For sure. Somebody else, again, I know I got a lot of people here who've had good experiences. I want you to share those. That's important. At least one more person. What made it good?
Like a couple years ago in the summer, and I thought we were pretty good, and we won a lot of the tournaments we played, and we won nationals too because we were all just like a family, and we did so many things together, like outside of softball and without our coaches and stuff, and we all just had so much fun playing together, and I thought that's what made us good.
Cool. Very cool. Anybody else want to toss in? I mean, the positive, the takeaway here is it is possible to have a great team, right? It's possible. We know that it's possible. Hopefully, everyone's had at least one experience. I know that when I was an undergraduate student, doing group projects for the most part was painful for the reasons that a bunch of you expressed, in the chat in terms of people waiting to do their part, people not necessarily doing their part. And there are good explanations for that behavior that hopefully, as you listen to the narrated PowerPoint, become more clear. One of them, a really important one, is that often there isn't enough work for the size of the group. That's a big deal. The size of the group, I hate to say this because it just sounds terrible, but size matters, okay? Size matters. When you have too many people, of course there's going to be slacking. It's actually rational behavior at that point. So having the right size group, and unfortunately, faculty members don't always get this calibrated right, okay? They'll have groups of 5 when maybe 4 or 3 would have been better. It's not very often that there aren't enough people. It's usually the other way. There are too many people, right? Also, this whole notion of common goal, common purpose. When you've got some people who don't care maybe about a grade, or they don't care as much as you do, that can be challenging. But I want to circle back to the leadership question because a couple of you talked really quite eloquently about the importance of leadership, whether you were sharing a positive or a negative example. A lot of times in these student project groups, I don't think we necessarily think about whether we have a leader. Am I right? We just sort of all perceive each other to be equals, but in reality, there's almost always someone playing that coordinator role, right? Someone who's trying to integrate and bring everybody together. And I want to share with you an observation that might change how you think about these projects a little bit as you go forward, because you'll have more. You'll do more of these things in school. And then, of course, as you go into the work world, into your career, your profession, you're going to do a lot of stuff in teams. So knowing how to work in teams is important. I'm going to use myself as an example of what not to do. When I was an undergraduate, I was very concerned about my grades. And I was the kind of person who, if I put effort into a class, I could get an A. Okay? Sometimes more or less effort, but if I wanted to get an A in a class, I could get an A in a class. I attribute all of that to the fact that I can read well, honestly. And I read fast, which is a super helpful skill, quite frankly. Unfortunately, that concern about my grades translated into me exerting influence in student project groups that, in retrospect, looking back, I would say was not positive. So rather than me trying to lift other people up, rather than me supporting other people, rather than me trying to help other people get better, I just would sort of take over. You know what I'm talking about? You ever been in a situation like this? So let's play this out. So I sort of take over. And, when people give me something, let's say for a paper, I rewrite a good part of it. Okay. Because it's not up to my standard. Okay. Now let's think about this from a human behavior standpoint. And you don't have to feel sorry for me. Okay. I'm the dork who committed these sins, and I have recognized them later and gotten better at this. If we think back to reinforcement theory from chapter 5, if a person does something and they are essentially punished for having done that something, their work is rejected, for example, not treated respectfully, what do we expect that person to do? What is rational behavior in response? Who wants to chime in? Be bold. You turn something in to somebody else, and they basically reject what you've turned in. What's your behavior going forward?
That actually just happened to me the other day.
Uh-huh.
I turned in a rough draft to my teacher, and she literally crossed out half of it.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I mean, like, I was a little disappointed because I was like, okay, I put so much work into it, and she just crossed it out. So I was like, what did I do wrong? I don't know. I kind of felt defeated, and like I didn't like, oh great, I put so much work into it. Now I have to like basically redo it all again. So I don't know. I felt defeated, but
sure.
Yeah.
I think that's normal. So now we have someone who feels pretty negatively about the whole thing, right? Is everybody tracking with me? How hard is somebody going to work under those circumstances? If they've pretty much decided that whatever they do isn't going to be good enough, how hard are they going to work?
Not hard.
Yeah, not hard. Duh. It's actually rational for that person to not work so hard. So let me connect some dots here. So I was this person, like I said, I got this standard here that I'm trying to meet, deciding that other people aren't doing what I want them to do, rather than trying to help them do better, rather than coaching them to do better, rather than working with them. I just forget it. And so this is what I would end up saying as an undergraduate. This is very typical. I end up saying things like this. Man, I end up doing all the work. I end up doing other people's work. If you've ever said that, maybe you should ask yourself, did you do something? I'm not saying you did necessarily, but did you do something that possibly contributed to that person not wanting to do the work for you or with you? Did you do something? I think it's entirely possible. I hated student group projects as an undergraduate for this reason. I always felt as though I had to do it all. And I'm sure that other people didn't like working with me. Right? Leadership matters. Even when we aren't necessarily thinking that we're in a leadership position, if we're influencing other people, well, that's leadership. Okay. So, hi, Mason. I see you there. How's it going? Okay. All right. So, stages of group development. This forming, storming, norming. Here's the main point I want to make, folks. You can't run away from conflict. If even one of those people I had worked with as an undergraduate had said to me, Lucy, you need to back the hell off. In a nice way, perhaps, more respectfully than what I just said. Wow, that would have been enlightening. I most likely, in response to that, would have altered my behavior. But instead, nobody confronted me. Is everybody tracking with me here? You cannot let conflict you can't just run away from it. You have to deal with it. And when you deal with it, things get better. I'm not saying it's easy to deal with, but it needs to be dealt with. So that's a key point. Don't run away from conflict. Deal with it. Okay. Second main point I want to make. We got to go many pages in here. Page 4. Again, on this topic of social loafing or slacking off. People are not inherently lazy. They're not. If they don't contribute, there's a reason for it. And it isn't because they're lazy. It could be they don't attach the same priority to whatever the project is that you do. It could be that they're juggling too many other things. It could be that the role they're being asked to play is insignificant. It doesn't matter. It's not intrinsically motivating. Are you with me? When you observe someone not doing their part, rather than making the assumption, the theory X assumption, that they're lazy, I want to encourage you to explore, to investigate the why, to try and understand why would a rational person decide to slack off. That's much smarter than imagining that they're lazy, because, as I said, there is no such thing as people being inherently lazy. If they behave in a lazy fashion, there's a reason for it. It behooves you to try and figure that out. So that's point 2. This is a pretty straightforward chapter, in my opinion, which is why I put it toward the end. When you got all kinds of other stuff going on in your life making you crazy, let's do something easier, okay? The last topic, starting on page 6, talks about how do we design effective teams. Here's why I asked you the question earlier about the 2 questions. One about whether you've had some situations that didn't go so great, and then if you've had teams that were wonderful. The examples that were shared by people, and thank you for doing that, where you talked about those great experiences that you had, if you look at your lecture outline, starting on the bottom of page 6, and you go through all 3 major categories of team composition, team context, and team process, you'll see everything that you mentioned. Everything. It's all there. Talking about the size of the team, the skills that people brought to the team. That's the stuff that's on the bottom of page 6. What people are capable of, people's personalities, what they're like to be around. Okay, the roles that people played so that people can be held accountable, right? And everybody understands what everybody's supposed to be doing. Then you get into context and you see the importance of reward systems. This, by the way, is also where leadership fits. So make a note of that. Context, this is where leadership fits. So thank you to those of you who talked about the importance of leadership, both positively and negatively. Leaders matter. And then finally, the process, this whole notion of common purpose, all being in to focus on something that we mutually care about. That's what it means to be part of a championship team, right? Those are the big points. Now, me just having talked about this doesn't, that's not a substitute for you listening to the narrated PowerPoints. I talk about more stuff that you need to know on those narrated PowerPoints. So take the hour that'll cost you to do both of those and listen to those. Again, I'm doing my best to try and make those interesting. You know, it's kind of hard when you're just talking to yourself, but I'm doing my best. Okay. Chapter 11, the preview. Are you ready? Chapter 11 is about decision making. This is my particular area of expertise because I look at decision making around disasters, right? So watching this whole COVID-19 pandemic, the stuff that we talked about earlier, sort of play out. This is all in my wheelhouse. It's quite fascinating to me. You've made some really important decisions already in your life. And we're going to talk about how you make those and how you can make even better decisions as you go forward in life. And I also want to reassure you about the process or the processes that you've used to make those decisions. We'll also talk a little bit about when people screw up and the conditions that are more likely to lead to that, to lead to bad decision making. So that's your preview for what will be our last chapter, because next week is it. And then you've just got to submit the exam by the following Tuesday. That's it. Has this time gone fast for you? Has this class gone fast for you? Holy mackerel, right? It certainly has for me. It always does because it's a 2 credit. But yeah, it's been flying. Okay. Topic infographics. So they're all graded. The grades are out there in Moodle. You can see the rubric. So when you go into Moodle, when you look at your grade, you should be able to see the rubric, what I wrote on it, if I wrote anything on it. Honestly, most of these were so great. I'm just like, check, check, check in the first column. 5, 5, 5, 5, maybe 5, 5, 4, 5, 5, you know, lots of 5s, lots of high scores because you did a fantastic job. Now, I have a request. You know, the college is always looking, the college communication folks are always looking for things that they can share with others about what students are doing, great things that students are doing. They're also interested now in how we're all coping with this stuff. A lot of you over the course of the 2 topic infographics have included things that relate very directly to the whole quarantining, having to be at home, having how to get through a semester where you've had to adjust your expectations and go online. I'd like your permission to share your topic infographics with the folks in our communication office, expecting that at least some of them might be shared more broadly with the college community. If you are not okay with sharing your stuff, send me a note, okay? Not in the chat right now. Send me an email. If you just don't want anybody else other than me seeing what you've produced, drop me a line. Otherwise, I'm going to assume that you're okay with sharing that information. Some of you don't even have your name in the infographic. It's fine. I don't need you to change them in any way, but they are really good. And I think it would be awesome for people to see how you have applied what you're learning in this class to this real thing that we're all having to experience. So like I said, if you don't want me to share, drop me a line. Otherwise, I'm going to do that because I think they're really fantastic. The leadership paper. Does anybody have any questions for me about what you need to do? That's due next week, next Thursday. Does anybody have any questions? Any uncertainties? How many of you have finished your interview? How many of you are planning to do that soon? It's okay. Hey, man, it doesn't matter to me when you do it. All that matters is that please leave yourself enough time to write the paper and do a good job on it, okay? I know that you're juggling lots of stuff, and this is one of many priorities that you have. No worries there, but make sure you leave yourself enough time to do a good job writing this thing, all right? I am working on grading your exams. It takes me a while to work through reading 5 essays for 27 folks, and I had a couple of folks who needed a bit of a time extension for different reasons. So I will have those fully graded by the end of the weekend for sure. So you'll be able to see your grade, and you should have a really good sense of how you're doing in the class by the time you see the grade on that second exam. That will be what you'll see in the overall. And when you look in Moodle at your overall percentage, that'll give you a pretty good sense of how things are going to end up, okay? The leadership paper, we started the class with a great question about how I graded. Let me tell you in general what tends to happen. In general, people tend to do very well on the leadership paper. Why? because they're writing about somebody they like. Duh. When we're doing something we actually like, we tend to do better, right? So no great surprise there. And you'll have found the experience of interviewing this person to be a positive one. I already know that y'all are good writers because I've seen your writing now in several different forms as part of the discussion stuff and then also with your exams. So I'm not expecting to see any serious issues in terms of how you write. It's really going to be content in terms of what your thinking is and how you're able to relate what you're hearing to the class. And again, I assure you, you can do this. The questions that I had you ask deliberately link to class stuff, okay? So it should be relatively straightforward. Okay. Questions for me? Concerns? Any uncertainties? Would it suck to finish 30 minutes early? Well, you know, you could stay on the line with me if you really want to, but if you don't, if you've got other things to do with your life, I'll see you next week. Send me an email if you need anything. Take care. Bye-bye. You too, Tiana. Have a great weekend. Take care. Peace out, all. You bet, Connor. Absolutely, we can talk. I've just got, looks like Clay and Sam. Are you guys still on? You're off now. Peace out, Sam. Clay, are you still on? Did you walk away from the computer and you didn't realize that I was ending early? Hey, Connor, let's do this. Let's disconnect and then let's just use the same link to connect back on. Okay? Okay.